Today's intro to video is Writing Skill 1 or W1. W1 is all about planning and preparing for an extended piece of writing. The full title of W1 is to identify the keywords and PALF of the task, PALF being purpose, audience, language and form, and then for students to scribble and sequence their ideas into paragraph order before they begin. For teachers of W1, it is perhaps best to consider W1 the process of effective planning for extended writing as its own lesson, its own identity, not as something to be quickly completed before the real work of the extended writing task. During my years as an English advisor, training English teachers and heads of department and helping English teams to build these inspirational and aspirational curriculum for their department, I was always surprised at how many schools would list poor planning as a key reason for student underperformance in examination, and yet there was never any mention of planning within the English curriculum. Planning was something that was commented on as an EBI, a target at the bottom of a piece of work perhaps. This work would be even better if you had planned in more detail, or if your planning had a greater consideration of the purpose, the audience, whatever it may be. But rather than simply having planning as something to get out the way or something to comment on as a target for students to perform, planning is so important, it really should be given its own identity within the curriculum. Perhaps even create whole banks of writing tasks, whether they are story tasks, descriptive writing tasks, or tasks such as articles, speeches and letters. Give students a time pressure to complete a plan and then do another one. Not always that the plan is for an extended piece of writing. Why not that students just get used to planning? Some of you will remember a concept called DEAR time from a number of years ago for drop everything and read. What about deep time for drop everything and plan? So that as an English team, you discuss the idea that this is so important that students are just able, under time-pressured circumstances, to be able to plan in detail. Why not deep time, go to the back of your book, plan that task, and then you get back on with the lesson for the day. Getting students used to planning under timed and pressured conditions, planning in detail and planning with an effective structure for beginning, middle and end is so important for exam performance. It just needs to be given a little bit more gravitas within the curriculum itself. The most helpful analogy is thinking about going on a journey. And before you set off on that journey, you need to think about what to take with you and the route that you are going to take. You would pack a bag, making sure that you have everything with you that you need. And then before driving off, if you're in the car, you would take a few minutes to enter the address into the sat-nav and then set off. Hopefully you've got everything you need with you and you're about to embark on a really calm and efficient journey because you took the time to consider what you need and you took the extra few minutes to think about where you're trying to end up, put it into the sat-nav, and you've got this lovely route to follow. If you don't do that and you don't think about what to take and you just leave the house and you just get in the car, inevitably you're going to have forgotten something. So I think the idea of packing before you set off, what do I need in this piece of writing? What am I told is a really important thing for this piece of writing to have? And the sat-nav analogy I think is great because if two drivers both get into their cars at the same time and they've got the same destination, 100 miles away, the driver that just gets in and drives off thinks that they're winning, thinks that they're like leading the race, if you like. But inevitably after 5 minutes or 10 minutes, they're going to go wrong. They're going to take a wrong turn. They're going to get stuck, find themselves in a dead end, traffic, whatever. The driver that has the patience to stop and think, right, this journey's so important. If I put the postcode into the sat-nav and just think about where I'm going to go, the 2 or 3 minutes that they spend at the beginning, they will inevitably make back on that journey. And I think a piece of extended writing is exactly the same. If you spend a few minutes thinking about what to take with you and a few minutes thinking about the finish line, you will have a much better written journey for you and for the person who's marking it than for the person who just sets off. And I've been that student many times, and it certainly didn't work for me. It's best to consider W1 in 3 separate parts. The first part of W1 is the importance of keywords. The second part of W1 is the importance of PALF. And the third part of W1 is the importance of scribble and sequence. Every single question or task that a student faces in any exam, whether that's in English language, English literature, or indeed in any exam that any student studies across other subjects and other levels below or beyond GCSE, is made up of keywords. Keywords are the words within that question or task that are so fundamentally important that you cannot afford to miss them. Those words, always written in black ink, should be highlighted or circled in a contrasting colour, red, green, blue, whatever it is, but always specifically identified, because those keywords will form what we call the steer of the response, so that the student steers their response towards the keywords. If those keywords are not found, it is highly unlikely that in an exam situation, an assessment situation of pressure and duress, it's highly unlikely that the student will remember at all times to steer their response towards them. So the very first thing that any student, any exam candidate of any exam should write on isn't the exam paper itself. The first thing to write on is the question or the task, and it's to identify which words steer their response. PALF stands for purpose, audience, language, and form. Not every task that a student is given will contain all elements of PALF. Most questions will provide the student with a purpose to the writings. The student will be asked maybe to argue, to persuade, to explain, inform, to advise. Some purposes have to be inferred. So if a student is asked to write a story, then the purpose has to be inferred as to entertain. It will never say, write a story to entertain the reader, but we can infer that the purpose of that form of story is to entertain the reader. It's really important to identify the purpose before starting, which is why it's in W1, because the purpose really dictates everything. It's your intention, it's your job, it's what you're trying to do. So identifying the purpose within the keywords is absolutely essential. The second part of PALF, the A stands for audience. And again, knowing who you are writing to or who you are speaking to controls everything. Audience is important to identify because it means that we write with the appropriate language. So whether that's something that's meant to be really formal, where we're trying to write up, a mixed formality where we're kind of writing across, or an informal sense of language where we're able to direct our language down, identifying who we are speaking to or who we are writing to is fundamental because of the L of PALF being language. No task in an exam will ever say, write with this level of language. We have to infer that from identifying the purpose and the audience. When we find the purpose and the audience of PALF, it helps us to consider what language is appropriate. For a head teacher, we might think, right, we need to direct this up, it's more formal. If it says write to your peers, you think, okay, that's okay for me to write across because we share the same level. Purpose and audience help us to find language. And finally, the F being form. Whether we are writing in a speech, we know it would start and end in a certain way. If we're writing a letter, it would start and end in a certain way, maybe an article. So identifying the form really helps us to consider, structurally at least, how something would begin and how it would end, even if the paragraphs in the middle are the same. Form of a text really helps us to consider how to introduce them and to conclude. Scribble and sequence is the approach to planning a piece of writing that I wish I had been taught. For the main reason, the scribble side of it. The word scribble is absolutely essential because it is empowering students to produce the plan in such a way that they don't need to feel under pressure for the plan to be perfect or correct. So by saying scribble, the connotation of that is presentation doesn't matter. Spellings do not matter, capital letters, full sentences, anything. And that's really important if you want students to plan properly and freely so that they've got something really good and really helpful that they can use to inspire this written journey that they're about to go on in the exam. Then scribble is a really important part of that. Students should be free to scribble down their ideas, and once the ideas are scribbled down, the sequence part is coming back to the ideas and putting them into a sense of order so that there is an introduction, a development and a conclusion. If a student has scribbled those ideas, separate boxes of ideas, because that's all a paragraph is, a box with a particular focus. So a box of ideas here, and then another box here with different ideas, another box here with different ideas. And when you've got 5 or 6, doesn't need to be any more, particularly for a GCSE when you'd only have about 45 minutes to write it up. 5 or 6 boxes, they're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you know when you're looking up at the clock, I've got to do box 1, I've got 5 or 6 minutes, box 2, 5 or 6 minutes. And scribbling down, recording the things that you're going to take with you. So back to the packing journey at the beginning, what did you say you were going to take? I'm going to take some language methods and punctuation and vocabulary. So you're thinking about what to take, scribble down the ideas, put them into order, and then you go on the journey. And the written journey should be completely calm. The plan and the map that you've prepared for yourself, you're just glancing over at that and then writing it up. Glancing over and writing it up. You're not even having to think. In the same way that the sat-nav, you're just looking at the sat-nav and driving, looking at the sat-nav and driving. If you find yourself having to think during the exam, then the plan isn't appropriate. The plan is there to just give a completely calm journey, and that's the sequence part. I don't think in sort of 20 years of meeting students, different schools around the country, there were ever more than 1 or 2 students per year group that could achieve their personal best without planning. There were always 1 or 2 very annoying students that could do this without planning. It was never me when I was at school. But whenever I say that to teachers, there's always a nod, like there's 1 student that can just get the highest grade without planning. They can just do it off the top of their head, and it's amazing how they do it. But 98% of students just cannot, like 98% of humans cannot just do it. It takes planning and preparation, and that's why we identify keywords and then purpose, audience, language, form, and we scribble ideas and we sequence them into order, because the rest of us, mere mortals, need to think about what we're doing before we do it. If students really want to achieve the highest grades at GCSE, or at any other level for that matter, that sat-nav analogy of what do I need before I get in the car, where am I going to go, 5 minutes to think about the journey and then set off, you will have a better journey for you and a better journey for the examiner. A red student for W1 really is not considering those 3 parts to the skill. They're probably not finding the keywords within the task itself. They're probably not correctly labeling PALF. And within the scribble and sequence plan, they're certainly not producing a map that would help them to then go on a written journey. So you would be able to look at the map that they've created. Maybe it's not sequenced. Maybe the paragraph idea is just a word, and you think, well, how are you going to turn that word into a paragraph? Maybe the red student hasn't thought about what to take with them. So if they're meant to take with them some language methods, some impressive vocabulary, maybe they're not even thinking about that. The red student in W1 is then probably going to struggle across W2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, because it's all about content and organisation. And the red student is one that really needs to prioritise W1 if they want to have an impact across all those other skills. A yellow student for W1 is a student who is really developing in that skill. So maybe they've identified the keywords, maybe correctly identified PALF, but the scribble and sequence plan is likely to still need development. The plan itself is probably still not adequate to take them on that written journey. So a student that is yellow and developing for W1 is probably still thinking whilst they're writing, and that's what we want to get away from. So maybe their paragraphs are still not in appropriate detail, and any of the things that they said that they would take with them, maybe there's still other things that they could have considered. It's developing. There are some signs in there that are really positive, but if that student wants a truly calm and enjoyable written journey, then that plan still needs significant development. A green student for W1 has identified the keywords, has identified the PALF within the task, and has produced a secure plan. So they've scribbled down their ideas, they've sequenced them into order, but there's still some room for improvement. Maybe some of the paragraphs could have a little bit more detail so that they really are not having to stop and think at all during the written journey. Maybe there's one or two things they've forgotten to take with them. So in that conversation with the green student, you'd look at the plan, say, this is really good, but do you not think you should take some statistics with you on this journey, or some rhetorical questions if it's like a paper 2 section B? If it was more of a paper 1 section B style, it might be, do you not think you should take some pathetic fallacy or some metaphor or simile? And they'd say, oh yeah. So it's tweaks. When a student is green for W1, you're talking about the little tweaks that are easy to make. That's what makes them green. It's really good, but there's still a few things that could be done to make that a great plan and then a great journey. A blue student for W1, find the keywords really quickly, identify the PALF really quickly, because remember, this is something that you're going to have to do in the exam hall. And they can produce a scribble and sequence plan in full detail that will then take them on a really calm, enjoyable written journey. Each paragraph, remember, still scribbled, so no full sentences, capitals, spelling, etc. None of that matters. But each paragraph has just got enough words and phrases, or symbols, emojis, it doesn't matter. Each paragraph box has got enough content in for them to glance at, and it inspires the paragraph that they're writing. So you can look at box 1 and it's paragraph 1, and then look at box 2 and it's paragraph 2. They at no point have to stop and kind of look around the exam hall and think, I'm not really sure what to write here. When they've considered what to take with them in terms of language methods, maybe box 1 has even got the metaphor in they're going to use. Box 2 has got the simile in that they're going to use. Box 3 has got the statistic in that they're going to use. So they really are not having to think at any point. That map is so efficient to inspire that written journey that it could almost be that somebody else could look at it and say, well, I could write that up. I could turn that into 5 or 6 paragraphs because of the way that you've put it together. And that's the blue student. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect, because that's not what blue means, but you're looking at it thinking, that's a great map. You've packed everything you need, and you've produced a great map for you to have a really efficient writing journey.